Coming up on Global Business, Chinese President Xi Jinping holds talks with his Belarusian counterpart Alexander Lukashenko on developing and strengthening ties. CSRC Chief Yi Huiman says the securities watchdog will take measures to stabilize China's stock market and deepen reform of the registration-based IPO system. And climate finance takes center stage at COP28 as China calls for more support for developing countries. Welcome to this edition of Global Business. I'm Zhenju Feng. First up, China and Belarus have agreed to continue strengthening cooperation. Chinese President Xi Jinping met with his Belarusian counterpart Alexander Lukashenko on Monday in Beijing. They discussed trade, cultural exchanges and industrial cooperation under the Belt and Road Initiative. President Xi said China firmly supports Belarus in pursuing a development path suited to its national conditions. He said China opposes external interference in Belarus' internal affairs. Xi Jinping said China is willing to continue to strengthen strategic coordination with Belarus and increase practical cooperation and deepen bilateral relations. He called for implementation of projects like the China-Belarus Industrial Park and more resources in industrial cooperation. And he urged further measures to facilitate cross-border transportation for more trade and personnel exchanges. Lukashenko said Belarus is committed to developing friendly relations with China and is willing to maintain close and high-level exchanges and push for greater development of the all-weather comprehensive strategic partnership. He said Belarus will continue to participate in the global initiatives proposed by Xi Jinping. The two heads of state also exchanged views on the Ukraine crisis. China is an important trading partner for Belarus, emphasizing a strategic trade relationship in the Eurasia region, according to China's Commerce Ministry. China and Belarus achieved a record bilateral trade volume of $5.08 billion in 2022. That's a 23% increase from a year ago. Specifically, China's imports from Belarus rose by 65% and exports increased by 20%. Since July 2022, the Central Bank of Belarus has included the Chinese yuan in its exchange basket with a weight of 10% equivalent to that of the euro. We asked a Belarusian analyst for his feelings about the relationship between the two countries. Take a listen.
In the past year, China-Belarus cooperation has achieved fruitful results. During the state visit of the president of Belarus to China in March this year, the leaders of the two countries signed a number of bilateral cooperation documents. Two-way trade has been increasing. Both Belarusian exports to China and imports from China are on the rise, both in quantity and in variety. More Belarusian goods are entering the Chinese market and attracting more buyers, which is encouraging for us. Most of the goods are agricultural products and food. Several more Belarusian companies have been granted access to China's vast market. This means that in the future, the range of products will be further expanded.
For more insights on China-Belarus relations, I would like to bring our guest, Shi Jing, Assistant Professor, Institute for International and Area Studies, Tsinghua University. Thank you for joining us. Trade between China and Belarus increased by 33% year-on-year in 2022, and China's imports from Belarus jumped by over 60% last year. What development opportunities has Belarus gained from China-Belarus cooperation and also the Belt and Road Initiative?
Belarus strongly supports China's Belt and Road Initiative, having embraced practical cooperation early on. The presidential visit to China today underscored Belarus' dedication to the BRI, emphasizing initiatives' positive impact on country's development. Over the years, a robust system of cooperation framework has been established between China and Belarus under the BRI, diversifying products and services to capitalize on each country's strengths. This collaboration is not just talk. It involves concrete measures like efficient transport, trade facilitation measures, and initiatives promoting people-to-people ties. The tangible outcomes contribute significantly to the growth of both sides, fostering a mutually beneficial partnership.
What impact has the China-Belarus industrial park had on Belarus industrial upgrading and employment?
Indeed, the Belt and Road Initiative has brought forth several noteworthy examples of cooperation between China and Belarus, with industrial park near Minsk being a prominent illustration. What makes this collaboration unique is the economic and trade model adopted, creating special economic park with policies that attract renowned enterprises. This departure from traditional forms has the potential to significantly boost national economic activities, fostering the development of real economy, generating employment opportunities, and introducing advanced economic processing and management in the host country. It is a modern approach that goes beyond mere cooperation, contributing to the broader socio-economic landscape.
Thank you so much, Shi Jing, Assistant Professor, Institute for International and Area Studies from Tsinghua University. The 24th China-EU summit will be held on Thursday in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping will meet with European Council President Charles Michel and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Premier Li Qiang will also co-chair the meeting with Michel and von der Leyen. This year marks the 20th anniversary of the comprehensive strategic partnership between China and the EU.
China and EU are partners, not rivals. The common interests of both sides far outweigh differences. China hopes the summit can serve as an important link connecting past and future. The two sides should enhance understanding and mutual trust through strategic communication, strengthen mutually beneficial cooperation through innovation, discuss solutions through dialogue and consultation, and collaborate to address global challenges. This is in line with two sides' fundamental and long-term interests, as well as the common expectations of the international community.
The president of Springer Nature Greater China, Niels Thomas, says the amount of scientific output from China exceeds the rest of the world. In an interview with CGTN, he also calls on China and the EU to further enhance cooperation in science and technology.
Do you still think we need enhanced cooperation on science and technology between China and EU?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is exactly what we should do, and this is also what we are trying here to do with Springer Nature. There is a clear benefit in international collaboration in science, and I think in the long run we will all really see it if we are making again researchers from all over the world, especially in the European Union, for example, to work together with Chinese researchers. We can clearly see from our data that research that is jointly conducted by diverse teams from Chinese researchers and from researchers from abroad, they are significantly higher in their reception and in their citations and in their usage, which means that the diversity of the different teams coming together really adds something in science.
How do you look at the Chinese science and technology development? What's the significance to the world?
That in simple terms, it's an absolute success story if you look at the last couple of years. If you look at, like, for example, the last 20 years, every year since now, and the trend is continuing, the power of the scientific output of China is growing very fast. So it's now really, China is now a powerhouse of scientific and research output. I believe the data really suggests that by starting this year, maybe already in the years before, but we are very sure for this year, the number of output or the amount of scientific output from China exceeds all other countries in the world.
What's your company's future plan in China?
I still very much believe in the Chinese market. We have expanded our offices during the pandemic, so while many other companies were declining from the Chinese market, we opened a new office, for example, in Nanjing in 2020. And in the last year, I think we have grown 1/3 of our staff. So we added almost 100 people in the last 12 months. And we will continue our growth story. So as the scientific output rises, it's also necessary that we grow our business here. So I have faith in this development.
China will deepen reform of its registration-based IPO system and enhance its multi-layer capital markets. That's what the Chinese Securities Regulatory Commission Chairman Yi Huiman said in an interview on the heels of the Central Financial Work Conference. Yi said China will uphold the registration-based IPO system with information disclosure at its core and push forward reforms in its regard. The government will extend support for firms in key areas. Yi Huiman said the securities watchdog will make more efforts to push forward supply-side reform in the capital market to bring in more long-term funds. On the demand side, the securities regulator will improve China's multi-layer capital market to better meet demand from firms for equity funding. In the meantime, he said the regulator will strive to improve the quality of listed companies and lift financial opening up to a higher level. He also talked about a combination of measures to stabilize China's volatile stock market. You're watching Global Business. Coming up next. Climate finance takes center stage at COP28 as China calls for more support for developing countries.
The global convergence for climate action is underway.
As world leaders, policymakers, and environmental champions
convene for a pivotal dialogue to safeguard our planet.
Join CGTN for COP28 in Dubai as the world transforms commitment into action for a sustainable planet.
The Business and Philosophy Climate Forum at COP28 provides a platform for private sector CEOs and heads of the state to discuss ways to accelerate climate solutions and drive bolder results. CGTN's Gao Ang spoke to the COP28 Special Representative for Business and Philanthropy, Bar Jafar, for his insights on the importance of international cooperation in tackling global climate change, especially collaboration between China and the US.
All large economies of the world need to work together and need to engage, of course, their stakeholders and communities, again, across business and philanthropy. But we also need to make sure that solutions are local. There's no cookie-cutter approach. Taking what works in America and trying to apply it in China or vice versa isn't going to work, or isn't necessarily the best way to move things forward. And the same when you look at the underrepresented communities in the world, when you have a whole continent like Africa with 600 million people who still don't have access to reliable electricity, or 2.4 billion people in the world without access to clean cooking fuels. This is where countries like China and the US can come and deploy not just technology and capital, but also political will. But we also need to make sure that these nations of the world are not seen as a charity case. This is a complete issue if we see it that way. Ultimately, these nations are on the front lines of global development and growth. And a lot of the solutions will be found locally in these nations by incredible entrepreneurs. So it is about a level playing field, and it is about also raising voices that have otherwise not been heard.
For more, let's get over to Dubai, where our correspondent Radhika Bajaj is following the latest at the World Climate Action Summit. Radhika brings us to the speed on what has been discussed so far in Dubai.
Hi, Jungfen. Well, today the focus area at COP28 was climate finance and gender equality, and many people would say that the success of this COP may just be judged by the action that is taken on the climate finance front, because there is a massive gap between the funds that are needed for countries to be climate resilient and to transition to green energy and the funds that are currently available. So to that end, several big ticket announcements taking place today. One coming in from the UAE Banking Federation, and it's a big one because the chairman has announced that the UAE Banking Federation will collectively mobilize nearly $270 billion in sustainable finance by 2030. So this is a major announcement that's been made today. Besides that, we've also seen the UK, France, the World Bank, the EBRD. They have announced announced that they will expand the use of climate-resilient debt clauses in their lending, which pause debt when countries are hit by natural disasters. So this is again very, very important. And the UK has gone ahead and said that they are announcing their first ever climate-resilient debt clause in Africa with Senegal. 73 other countries have joined together to issue a call to action for adoption of these clauses worldwide. Besides that, some smaller events also taking place around mobilizing finance towards climate action. We saw the launch of the Global Climate Finance Center, and this has been done by 9 major banks as well as asset managers who are essentially now looking at what are the barriers to investing in low carbon projects, and they will identify these barriers and then figure out a financial framework to also overcome these barriers. Now, why are these discussions important? Because you look at several studies that have been done, whether it's by the UN or other firms or other organizations as well, and they say that the adaptation needs of the world have been growing, especially in the developing countries who are short on resources but are already fighting effects of climate change, and at the same time they are trying to transition to greener energy to meet their Paris Agreement goals. And in these areas, we're looking at adaptation finance inflows being really, really low. And the gap is estimated to be anywhere between 194 to 366 billion US dollars per year, pardon me there. So as you can see, these figures are massive, and if we are looking at bridging this gap, there will be the need of private sector capital to step in. So a lot of conversation today has been about that.
Thank you so much for the update, Radhika Bajaj, for us in Dubai. Also join us, a special guest from Dubai, Dennis Tapoor, Global Managing Director at Roland Berger. Thanks for joining us, Dennis. When we talk about climate change, we have to talk about funding, where the money comes from. Now, funds from developed countries and other sources to deliver adequate climate financing have fallen far short of expectations and promises. To what extent do you think the success of COP28 depends on climate finance?
Yes, money is needed, indeed. I think, indeed, there is probably less funding than expected, but I think the launch of the Loss and Damages Fund a couple of days ago is a good news. Also, tactically, it's good that it comes first in COP28, even though the amounts are way too small, but it's still a positive and, let's say, tactically a good start with UAE, the host country, with Europe pledging significant amounts, and US and Japan also pledging, yet with smaller amount. These funds are very important because they are there to mitigate consequences of natural disasters that are related to climate events, to rebuild infrastructure, and they can be used then also to get additional debt finance. So that's already something. I think what we just heard today, the pledge, quite massive pledge by the banking sector in UAE and other funders, as was just said before, that's also very good news because a lot more money is expected. I think the need is estimated at 2.5 trillion US dollar a year in the coming decades in order to mitigate the consequences of climate change and also fund the energy transition. So it's very important that money is available and that the private sector is backing this with also special conditions labeled and dedicated to climate.
Dennis, nowadays climate is so politically correct to talk about. Everyone's talking about it. Roland Berger is calling for actions rather than just words when it's come to reducing emissions. What are your suggestions for governments with regard to policies and for companies who are also responsible for building a green environment?
Sure. You know, we as a consulting firm support companies' transformation. And we see really committed clients across the world that are transforming their organization, transforming their supply chains to lower their carbon footprint with pledges to go net carbon zero by 2040, 2050. And that's true across all industries, including very, very heavy industries like steel or aluminum. And they do this because they're committed and it's about leadership They also do this because they're under pressure of shareholders, of clients, and they also seek competitive advantage. What they need is a price for carbon constraint, because otherwise companies make investments or incur additional costs to avoid CO2 emissions, but otherwise this cost would not be covered. So if there is a price for carbon, they know why they're making these investments. So it's very important that governments agree everywhere on pricing carbon adequately, and we're still very far. Many countries do not have carbon pricing mechanism, and even in Europe, where it's existing, where the carbon market is existing, the price of carbon around 80 to 100 euro a ton of carbon on average this year is still too low. And governments need also to act and accelerate policy support for renewable energy, setting ambitious targets, more ambitious targets, but also on the ground, on the field, at local level, to help accelerate permitting of renewable energy, because simply otherwise companies cannot invest. We have companies, our clients, that are ready to invest, but sometimes they simply cannot.
Thank you so much, Dennis. That's our special guest from Dubai, Dennis DePaul, Global Managing Director at Roland Berger. Brazil has been employing an effective land restoration technique through crop cultivation, leading to ecosystem improvement. CGTN's Lucrecia Franco brings us the details.
This is Saudade, a 2,720-hectare farm located in the northern region of the state of Rio de Janeiro. Originally part of Brazil's Atlantic rainforest, it was turned into pasture land and grazed by cattle until the soil was degraded and overrun by invasive weed species. In 2012, while attempting to restart the beef production operation, new ownership stumbled onto a viable land recovery process with the introduction of crops. Now, in addition to thousands of beef cows, 600 hectares are planted with rice, beans and corn.
With this combined livestock and crop system, we achieved healthier pastures, resulting in overall higher productivity and better soil conservation.
Key to integrated farming is rotating between crops and grazing and improving soil with fertilizers, including cow manure. What this farm did by trial and error is now the cornerstone of Brazil's proposal to restore 40 million hectares of degraded land in the coming decades, an area roughly the size of Germany.
The survey we conducted showed that we have around 152 million hectares of farmland, but a large part of it is in the process of degradation. But some 55 million hectares are in good conditions and could double the country's food production.
Arguing that preserving its vulnerable ecosystems is of global interest, Brazil is seeking $120 billion for its land recovery proposal at the COP28 Climate Action Summit in Dubai. Lucrecia Franco, CGTN, Rio de Janeiro.
Germany's Ruhr region is an important industrial zone in Europe, but the river running through it was seriously polluted during the discharge of large amounts of industrial wastewater and domestic sewage. With the implementation of European standard treatment plants and the Safe Ruhr project, the local water ecology has been greatly improved, as has the quality of life of residents. Take a look.
The Ruhr Valley could be considered the birthplace of modern Germany. Nearly 3,000 square kilometers of industry used to build the country's roads and railways, but at a cost to the local environment. For decades, industrial waste was pumped into nearby lakes and rivers, including the Ruhr, a 220-kilometer waterway which gives the region its name.
We had a huge amount of coal mining, coking facilities, steel manufacturers, so biological treatment was not really possible.
Norbert Jarden is the CEO of Ruhrverband, an organization responsible for water management in the catchment area of the Ruhr River, which nearly 5 million people rely on for drinking water. The closure of many factories, along with the establishment of 65 European standard treatment plants, has certainly improved the water quality, but so too has the Safe Ruhr project, which aims to revive one of the area's favorite pastimes.
In the first half of the last century, swimming was very popular. Due to the increasing pollution, the authorities in 1973 forbid to further swim in the River Ruhr.
Launched in 2012, the Safe Ruhr project called for European guidelines on safe swimming to be implemented.
In May 2017, in the year when Essen was the green capital of Europe, the swimming site was officially opened. More than 40 years after it has been forbidden to swim in the River Ruhr, swimming was again officially allowed.
Today, there are 3 official swimming areas along the Ruhr River. Early on in the project, it was established that a close eye was needed to monitor how much municipal wastewater was entering the river, particularly as it was transported along the same sewer pipes as rainwater.
An overflow of this combined sewage is critical to the cleanliness of the water. Therefore, an early warning system is used, which can predict any fluctuations in the water quality. Based on this, swimming areas can then be opened or closed. Here in Baldenei See, just south of Essen, they have around 100 swimming days per year now.
But it's not only swimming that's popular. Local resident Daniel spends every free minute at Baldenei See, and yes, he eats what he catches.
The water is now very, very clear. You can see the bottom of the lake in places.
The Safe Ruhr project has helped change the view many have of the valley. What was once considered an industrial wasteland is now being transformed into an environmental role model. Natalie Carney, CGTN, in Essen.
In other headlines, let's take a look at some international news. The international spot gold price soared to $2,100 today. That's about a 17% increase over the past year and has rebounded about 10% since October low. A recent U.S. stock rally could wobble if tensions spike after Red Sea attacks. There's still a risk in the Israeli-Hamas war could widen into a broader conflict, with 3 commercial vessels coming under attack in the southern Red Sea. McDonald's is raising its bets on China, bucking Western firms' de-risking trend, while Yum China, which operates KFC and Pizza Hut, among other brands, already has more than 14,000 outlets across the country. With that, we'll wrap up this edition of Global Business. Before we wrap up, let's go to the UK, where people are paying to hug a cow to relieve pressure and stress. I'm Zhu Jufeng in Beijing. Thanks for watching.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.